You know who I've missed quite a bit? Talking about her, reviewing the moments that were always so great from Fox News is The Five, the liberal host on that show, Jessica Tarlov. She's been away on maternity leave, absolutely fantastic, wishing her well, but she took a little bit of time away from that to do a podcast that I saw come across my feed today, and it's good to hear from her again amid all of the craziness with Trump. So we'll get to moments, I have a bunch for you, from that interview that was just released. But first, one of the things she'll address is how the question from the interviewer, Scott Galloway, is how are your conservative hosts, from what you're aware of, really feeling behind the scenes, off camera, about Trump's conviction and about his broader legal troubles and the political impact of those things. So she'll answer that question. But first, the narrative that we hear publicly from these individuals is that they're confident. They're confident that the legal troubles of Trump will only serve him in the election because the American people see that this is him being targeted. And if they weren't doing it to him, then it would be targeting them. And he's standing in the way in some sense. So here's a flashback to a past Fox News on The Five specifically moment with Jessica Tarlov where this is slapped around by her. Then we'll get to the podcast.
From me. So since Donald Trump ran the first time, he has been making this argument. If they could do this to me, they could do this to you. The average person is not inflating their wealth by $800 million to $2.2 billion. They're not sexually assaulting women. They're not storing classified documents in the toilet.
Have you subscribed?
I'm trying.
Done.
For the both of our sakes. Click the subscribe button.
They're not fomenting an insurrection. Mar-a-Lago, you remember the documents?
Let's focus on this case. We can do.
No, but it worries about Donald Trump. You always do that.
No, Jessica, you're doing a laundry list.
Really? You just said Judge Edgar on this too.
And then they all jump on her, as we see often. So then, again, taking a brief moment out of her maternity leave to address this subject, and it was refreshing to hear from her. Here's the question about those conservative hosts and what they feel about this behind the scenes.
You work with a conservative network, or what is the vibe when you talk to people off camera? Do they generally believe this is another example of the deep state going after, as a function of Trump derangement syndrome, or this is bad for us? What's the vibe off mic or off camera among conservatives?
I think that they actually feel both of those things, and that we're always trying to put people into one box, and it's actually a lot more complex than that. So yes, the deep state is real, and they'll go back and try to relitigate, quote, Russiagate with me, and then I'll get all hot and bothered again about Hillary Clinton, and they'll be like, actually, I don't want to talk to you about this anymore. And then they also understand the fact that this does not help their case. And you can tell that Republicans know that it's a bad thing from the type of panic in the way that they're speaking about him being a convicted felon. They want to raise a ton of money, which they did. I mean, we'll see what the actual figures are, but...
And then getting into that, but indicating, and it's so true, the panic, the freak out that we've seen. I'm reminded again of Dan Bongino yelling, "We're going to remember this, liberals." It doesn't match the confident tone they sometimes want to project, which is that Americans see this for what it is. They see how transparently political and rigged this all was. Again, nonsense, but that's what they're saying. And that is why this is actually going to help Trump, because his victimhood will be something that the American people want to address and act on behalf of and sort of reward him electorally for him being wronged so badly. But their panic doesn't match that, because he's not going to be rewarded electorally, hopefully. And a lot of Americans don't see this as illegitimate. They see it for what it is, which is a legitimate process playing out. Trump getting himself into legal trouble and dealing with the repercussions of it. And we've seen polling, as Jessica Tarlov, I think in one of these clips we'll get into, that is devastating for Trump. Not that Biden's pulled ahead in a major way in the polls, but instead you have big percentages, a majority of independents saying that Trump should drop out of the race. And then you have 16% of Republicans saying the same, which you would hope all of them would say that, but even just a percentage that size could be the thing that sinks Trump's campaign. So with that being said, let's go back a little bit in the interview and watch Jessica Tarlov's response to the question about how this will impact Trump's political prospects.
Similar. So if you think about how many people are actually up for grabs, how few we have to persuade that this matters and that this isn't just a one-off, that he lied about this, but that he is a chronic liar. And that has been a thread through the E. Jean Carroll case, the civil fraud case, and if we ever get to the marquee cases, which obviously I would have preferred if we were talking about the nuclear secrets that are hanging out in the toilet at Mar-a-Lago or January 6th before we were talking about the hush money case. I think that you can persuade a lot of people with that to just say, you know what, maybe I was thinking about giving him another shot, but the guy is such an effing liar.
You work with and
then into that question. And I do think, as I've said before, it's easier to dishonestly compel people into not caring about Trump's legal troubles if you make the conversation super narrow. And so I think sometimes conservatives can do a good job of doing just that and hyper-fixating on a particular talking point around the hush money case, for example. But if we zoom out, and as I've gone through so many times, and think, does it really, MAGA? Does it really make more sense that all of this could be a conspiracy to take him down? Does that really make more sense than just maybe he keeps doing things that are against the law and now is dealing with the outcome of that? And I do think the cases with or relating to the election and him trying to block the peaceful transfer of power and the classified documents case will further compel people into understanding the wrongdoing that Trump has been engaging in for so many years. The only issue is he's successfully delaying those in the classified documents case with the help of the judge that he appointed. And so if that's pushed back past the election, will people have that understanding, that light bulb will go off? We'll have to see. But definitely the piling up of all of these different issues for him makes more and more clear the legitimacy of it all. In my mind, here's more.
And these were people who were deeply committed and believed that the election had been stolen. I thought,
I should say, the question from Galloway is an interesting one. He's here talking about during the quote-unquote stop the steal era when MAGA was screaming that we got to stop the steal after Trump had lost but before Biden was sworn in. He saw a level of energy and passion and activism that, despite the rhetorical rage from people, doesn't seem to be materializing yet on the ground with MAGA.
I'm just so out of touch with America and the passion they felt, the number of people. When the verdict came down, I was encouraged at how what I'll call little agita, grievance, or rage among the general populace was. I see it as there's rage fatigue, that people are starting to think, you know what, I'm still going to vote for him, but I'm not going to storm the Capitol. Do you sense the same thing?
I mean, that's the hope, but we're also far out from the election. I think the vibe in October is going to be a lot more heightened on both sides of this. I was surprised that there weren't more lefties showing up at the courthouse to troll him, right? Or standing outside of Trump Tower and the new Tiffany's, which is gorgeous, and trying to do it that way.
Yeah, and I think Jessica's absolutely correct that the temperature is going to be rising for sure as we get closer to the election. And I hope and I beg MAGA to not let that go too far, as we saw after the 2020 election. But there is a hopeful element to it's true. Not many MAGA people showed up to the courthouse to show their support for Trump. And you didn't see that type of on the ground rage expressed. But across right wing media and, at least purportedly, this is as big and existential of an issue as the quote unquote stealing of the 2020 election for them. So it is a dangerous and scary time to be in a position when these lies about our justice system have been told, like was happening with the election. Where that leads is unknown, but unfortunate. We know that for sure. But then I was thinking about his terminology the rage fatigue. Is there rage fatigue? I think about this a lot. If you're a Fox News viewer, a MAGA person, you're listening to Trump's every word, which many of them don't, but they support him a lot. It's bizarre. But do you ever get rage fatigue? They're constantly telling you that this evil Biden or something, or the left, is going to do things that they never end up doing. And all these conspiracy theories never end up materializing in meaningful ways. All of the predictions don't come true. And you might remember that, speaking of the Stop the Steal time, a bunch of MAGA was so convinced that Biden wasn't going to take over even after he won the election, that Laura Ingraham got a bunch of backlash because she dared to say, listen, I think something was fishy, but Biden's going to take over. He's going to be president even if it's illegitimate. And MAGA was mad. No, he's not going to. So none of these false predictions ever dissuade you, MAGA, from believing this rage might be designed to stoke fear, to rev you up, to keep your eyes on the television, but to not actually give you accurate information and portray reality in a way that is anything close to reality. Here's more.
And you see it with Gretchen Whitmer as well, Josh Shapiro, Wes Moore is becoming a superstar this way. So I think that those folks can be out there.
And I should say, sorry, I'm forgetting to give you the context of the questions. Here, she's asked what the Democratic Party should do going into the election, what's her advice for them, and specifically talking about the surrogates that are good to be out there making the case for Biden.
Wes Moore is becoming a superstar this way. So I think that those folks can be out there threading the needle. And Biden has dabbled in the convicted felon jargon a little. But in general, I want to see more of the interviews, like he's on the cover of Time that came out this morning. I want to see more of that, him talking about the policy issues, what he's actually done in the Middle East. He's pretty critical of Netanyahu, actually, which is something that I think will not only appease the left side of the party, but a lot of the people like me who are pretty moderate in the middle, want Israel to do everything that they possibly can to get the hostages back and to bring peace, but to recognize that Netanyahu is a bad actor in all of that. So I think Biden, stays a statesman. But he unleashes the beast underneath that and makes sure that every one of those gettable voters knows what the alternative is and that they.
Yeah, one of the things that was being talked about that you heard the tail end of there was, like I said, surrogates. And people are not out there making the case enough. In my conversation recently with Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, he's one of the people who is out there. He's on Fox News. He's doing these interviews. He's going to college campuses, making the case for Biden's reelection. There aren't enough Ro Khannas. And so I actually asked him, can you get your colleagues to go do the same? Because we need a lot of voices everywhere, meeting people where they are, on all networks, in all different settings, like I said, on the ground in different ways. And right now we don't have that. Maybe people are waiting until a little bit closer to the election, but any person who understands the stakes of this election needs to be out there, especially people who are in positions of power, like the Congress people that I'm thinking of who aren't being loud enough. They need to get out there and make the case, and then Biden, of course, should as well. But Biden can't do it alone, and often his messaging doesn't land as effectively as we'd like, and so having a bunch of voices, wording it in different ways, bringing different messages to different individuals is exactly what needs to happen. And right now, that caliber of advocacy hasn't yet been met. On this one, this is Jessica Tarlov making a point that is so important. Two big branding things need to happen for the Democratic Party: taking back patriotism and taking back law and order, because those are the things the Republican Party, among other things, are just abandoning. Now's the time to take those labels.
If we want to get away from defund the police, which I wish had never happened, and move more towards we're the party of law and order, and we can make that claim now, right? They don't respect any judicial decisions at this point. They think the Supreme Court is on tap for them. Mike Johnson out there saying I think they'll step in. I called my buddies over there and they'll do something, that she has a real role to play. The surrogate strategy, it'll be rolled out as the campaign gets going, but I would love to see it more. And
Yeah, it's the moment. I was just having a conversation with someone who was saying, I want a president who sort of is proud of and wants to embody American values, right? And one of the things I was trying to convey is that's not Trump, because our democratic values are crucial. Our constitutional values are crucial. Believing in our justice system is a key democratic value. Law and order, or a key American value. Law and order is something Republicans said they stood for. They don't. They're attacking it openly right now. And so the Democratic Party needs to go on the offense in taking those labels back. One more clip.
But I really appreciate your fact-based commentary, or that you always come to represent the Democratic side in a reasonable way. And that's the key to all of this. Just be reasonable. You know, don't be unhinged. And right now the Republicans look unhinged.
So before we
Yeah, it is really interesting. She was reflecting on Fox News viewers who say to her that she is not aligned with them politically a ton, but she is someone who can articulate things in a way they respect. And I get that a lot too when I doing my show. People will say that, who are Republicans, will watch the show. And also in these personal conversations I've been having, trying to reach people in my life that I know who may vote for Trump or who don't know what they're going to do. And often after talking for a while, even if I haven't convinced them, they'll say, I didn't know that you could support Biden being reelected and identify as a Democrat and be this reasonable, right? And so I think distinguishing in these conversations between a lot of, honestly, irrational, but very loud, but I would say not representative of the broader movement, voices on the quote-unquote left versus your reasonable voices, which I think most people that I'm talking to will understand the stakes, who are going out there doing the work, are rational, reasonable. It's not some one in a million thing, but people experience it that way because the most provocative things almost always rise to the top in the social media world. And so as we talk and have more of these conversations, presenting things, let's just be reasonable. Let's have a pragmatic conversation. Let me talk about the policy record of Biden. Let me explain in a level-headed way why it is that Trump is such an existential threat to democracy, and let's see where we can go from there. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments. If you want to get an extra episode of the show every day, Monday through Friday, unless we take days off, you can do so by clicking the join button below.